Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that's
Speaker tonight. Our speaker tonight is Roy Flanagan. He's the Senior Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Agent for the City of Virginia Beach. I will note that every time I walk into Roy's office, he is always talking to a farmer of one kind or another. They really respect what he does and how much he knows, and I know that because they're always there. So Roy is a 1996 graduate of Ferrum College and has a BS in agriculture. He's also a graduate of Virginia Tech, where he received an MS in agriculture and life sciences. Roy and his family live in the Pungo section of Virginia Beach. And for those who aren't Virginia Beachites, this is in the southern part of the city, where they farm a little over 140 acres consisting of grains, sweet potatoes, vegetables, strawberries, and agritourism activities. He is a member of the Virginia Strawberry Association Board of Directors. He is a member and the current president-elect of the Virginia Association of Agriculture Extension Agents. He's a member of the National Association of County Extension Agents. After college, Roy worked for the local Southern States store, and then he started farming full-time before he accepted the job as conservation specialist for the Virginia Dare Soil and Water Conservation District. He worked there for over 8 years. He's been an agricultural agent in Virginia Beach with Virginia Cooperative Extension just over 13 years. And Roy, it's you.
Well, thank you, Miss Candy. That was 10 minutes of my program. I was gonna tell all that good stuff, but glad to be here with y'all today. Thank you for inviting me. Let me see if I can get my slideshow started and share my screen. All right, somebody confirm that it looks right, and I'm gonna roll on.
it's up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, when Miss Candy asked me to talk about GMOs, I thought sure, no problem. I took a class in my master's work called Biotechnology in Agriculture and Society, thinking it was going to be the fluff of all fluffs where you just spouted opinions and talked about things, and it was like genetics 404, and barely made it through it. I really thought I was going to have to just give it up at that point, but anyhow, learned a little bit. The I do like to always start out with who I am, and Miss Candy did a great job of explaining what I do outside of the office. My job in the office, when I try to explain the difference between Ashton and myself, because we're both on paper, we're ag and natural resources extension agents, but I primarily work with commercial producers. So if they could be doing hemp, you could be doing livestock, really anything you're growing and trying to make a profit with it. That's kind of my main stakeholders. But as a tax paid individual, I work for everybody, and I don't ever not talk to anybody. So phone rings, I answer, and we roll on like that. And I do believe it's a lifestyle choice, not a job. So the two pictures up there, if you're curious, that's me driving the tractor with my feet, giving my mom a thumbs up back in the day. And Miss Candy's kind of hit on all this. I do want to say that I don't know why I am blessed, but I'm blessed that my wife has put up with me for over 28 years, and we do have 5 children, 25 to 15, and that's just an awesome blessing every day. So I've got goals on here, and I really only have one for this presentation, and I hope that we all learn something new. I learned quite a few things as I was trying to put this together, and if you can take one or two things away from this, I hope it's time well spent, because if we're not learning, we're going backwards. There are a lot of names out there for variations of what we're going to talk about tonight. And later on, I'm going to have to pick two, and I'm going to try and stick with that. But there, it is a lot out there. So ultimately, and you'll find this happens all the time, I'm going to get ahead of myself in my slides, but conventional versus genetically engineered. So, what's out there as far as GMO, genetically modified organisms, I think it's kind of a little misleading and misadvertising. But and when Miss Candy talked to me, I was like, well, that's transgenic. I'll explain the differences. Well, doing my research, it seems like genetically engineered has been, um, a I guess, the wording that is being used now, and I like that much better than GMO, and I'll explain later on. But for the most part, I'm going to try and talk about conventional and genetically engineered. So those will be the two main themes. So back in the beginning, and what really revolutionized, I guess, the biotechnology boom, if you will, was these two fellows from Stanford University, and being able to insert this molecule and have it be replicated was the most awesome thing to really get the era moving on genetically engineering, and just some big changes came from that. And that, so like it or not, they're kind of the ones that you should be able to credit back in like 1973. When it comes down to it, it really doesn't matter whether it's a person, whether it's a crop, anything living is made up of these four chemicals. Okay, so those four things make up everything from a blade of grass to a horse. It just, some species have way more genes, if you will, and depending on how those chemicals are organized and how they're set in there, is kind of how we'll end up and how complex we are. But I thought that was important to note because it is pretty simple at its base. And I already, I told you we were going to use genetically engineering, but I did steal a few slides from other people that I credited in the beginning. So some of these may have GMO, but it's telling you why GMO is not actually the GMO that's publicized. So, we've been manipulating the DNA of plants forever in a conventional manner, right? Not inserting something, but just through traditional breeding methods. And this is one good example where we've taken a wild raper mustard and decided we're going to focus on multiple things to get different brassicas. And I'll show you a little bit more about that here in a second. But you know, this is totally a genetically modified organism, right? Because it's not in its natural state of a wild mustard of no use to anybody. And this kind of takes that a little farther, talking about how the breeders work towards getting a cabbage, right? They just started selecting for these abnormally large terminal buds. And you can use this example all the way through for the broccoli and the cauliflower, and, just some great things that we all enjoy eating. And as far as I'm concerned, that's considered a genetically modified organism. And I'll get into some more nuts and bolts later, but this is about as simple as I can put it. When we're talking about something that's had a gene or something from another species put into it. So that's my dad on the 3910 tractor. And during some of his heart issues, they found he had leaky valve. They took a valve from a hog and they put that in my dad. So now he's a transgenic or genetically engineered because he has a part of him that has come from another species. On the conventional side, that's my daughter. My wife and I came together to make my daughter, and we're both of the same species. So I'm considering that conventional. So throughout the rest of this. That's kind of the gist, and I hope that makes sense. I will say I thought I had given up presentations on Zoom after COVID, so I'm not used to just sitting here talking to myself, but I'll do the best I can. And I will throw in some pictures every once in a while just to break it up because I wouldn't want to listen to me the whole time or get bored. You can just kind of, anyhow, it's just kind of to break things up. But this picture has some relevance here because that's a field of squash or pumpkins. I can't remember now, but knowing me, we used pre-emergent herbicide. So herbicide that you spray after the seed goes in the ground that is supposed to prevent any of the weeds from emerging. Pre-emergent herbicide takes activation from rainfall. We didn't get the rainfall, so I have a bunch of weeds. You have no choice. If you want to have a crop, we're going to have to hoe it. But if that plant had been a genetically engineered plant that could accept herbicide over the top, it would have been a whole lot easier to just spray a contact herbicide and get the job done. But I wouldn't have had the quality time with my three little fellas. Wanted to mention a few other things that are benefits of genetic engineering, and I don't know how many of us that you don't know dozens of people that are on insulin, right? So insulin today, the billions of people that are on it would not be as available or potentially as economical as it would be if it wasn't for genetically engineered. So that was one of the main things on the medical side that has come out of it. This antithrombin, an anticoagulant, that's just another example. And I just pulled a few things that I thought people might recognize, especially the vaccines like Zika, Ebola, flu shots, and hepatitis B. So, that's just some examples how it's not just crops, that we've benefited from. And I won't dwell on that. I might touch on some other components or other industries that might benefit as well later on as well. But for the rest of the time, I'm going to try and stick with crops because I feel like that was where we wanted to focus. So here in a little bit, we'll talk about more about genetically engineered and the crops that have a genetically engineered option, if you will. And I'm kind of going to try and go through the traits and who benefits from these traits, whether it's just the farmers or just society, et cetera, et cetera. But so when it began the and this is kind of just basics again, but the it was all done in lab setting. They had this gene gun that literally shot the particles in there, and I'm just kind of reiterating where conventional breeding, it's a longer process, and you're kind of addressing all the genes at the same time. Where the genetic engineering, you can go in and be more exact, and there's so many examples and how being exact has changed our healthcare system, and even for something as simple as like insecticide, being exact and killing a worm versus killing all of our insects. So just throwing that out there. And I'm not going to dwell on this either, but I think I could not find anything where genetically engineered crops were not safe. And I think that is as close to a fact as it can be because we're on like 30 years plus. I figured you might be interested in knowing like what crops in the United States are potentially genetically engineered, and kind of broke down into two categories. You've got the crops that are used in products like soybeans, corn. We don't eat field corn or soybeans directly, but we'll eat it through a pig or a cow or something like that. and then you got the crops that are consumed direct, right? So in this I guess chart, the soybeans, they came out in 1995. The H means that it's tolerant for herbicide. Later on, not at 1995, and I didn't put the date in there, but later on they started working for more benefits like the oleic acid and the stearidonic acid. And you can just go through the examples. I really don't like people to read to me, so I'm not going to try and read to y'all. But I did find it interesting in 2002 they came out with a tobacco that was made to have less nicotine. So that was interesting. The I means insect tolerant, so it's not. I think I'm getting ahead of myself again, so I'll stop there. But on the consumed direct side, there are squash. So it's summer squash that have been genetically engineered to resist a virus. And that's the same thing with the potato, same thing with the papaya. Um, Most viruses are vectored by insects. If we were to try and prevent, if we knew we're at risk for a virus on a vegetable and we're trying to prevent the insects, we're not going to be following IPM. It's going to be following more of a preventative spray schedule. So you're utilizing a whole lot more insecticides and whatnot. And I think with the where what everybody wants to do is follow an IPM, integrated pest management. You scout for the insect, you treat for the insect. But I think when you've got a crop at risk for a virus that's known, that kind of goes out the window. I did put in there that currently 0 acres in production on that potato. Um, and that's mainly Mason shucks. That was mainly because they didn't think that the consumer would accept that. This kind of shows you what is used as percent of acres in the US, and you can see the big ones are your row crops, right? Your cotton, canola, corn, soybeans, and even sugar beets. For the most part, that's considered a commodity, not something that's fresh. But that papaya, um, and we'll see it here in a minute, that saved the Hawaiian papaya industry. If it wasn't for that, I don't think they would have had one because of the virus. So this just kind of breaks down the different targets, or the main things that they're addressing through genetic engineering to date. You've got the herbicide tolerance, which of course is the largest one, insect tolerance as well. And that's, it's not the same as herbicide tolerance. Doesn't mean that the plant is resistant to an insecticide. It actually means that it has that BT in the plant. So when the right insect bites it, it kills the insect. And I guess the future is in this improved nutrition, right? Because I think as our population grows, as a world, we're going to have a whole lot more haves and haves nots. And I think that if there's ways to address that, we probably should be forward thinking to actually look at that. The disease resistance, I mean, all this stuff would be good if it was possible. And we don't really know what's possible yet, but there's all of this going on currently. So this is how I set it up, and I apologize that my little X marks the spot kind of shifted over, but I'm going to go through the most of the different traits and kind of say what it's good for. And I don't know, hopefully it'll open your eyes up a little bit. But on the herbicide resistance side, and most of us are familiar with no-till, planting a crop without tilling the ground. It's a big effort on the soil and water side where the state funds practices with farmers basically because it's easier to work with a farmer controlling 1,000 acres than 1,000 people controlling 1 acre, for example. And carbon sequestration, all this is important in not tilling the soil allows you to do that, right? But by making that choice, you automatically choose to be a herbicide heavy model. Okay, so if you're doing no-till, it usually means that you're herbicide heavy. So there's risk with that, right? But just showing here the soil erosion and potentially the, you know, if that field had been no-tilled, that might have been prevented, right? But farmers will benefit from stuff like that because it's less trips across the field, and hopefully that should outweigh the cost of the additional herbicides. And the environment, you got to weigh both, right? We just talked about it being a herbicide heavy. Well, the herbicides have labels, and as long as we follow the label, most of the time there is no issue to public waters, and keeping that ground covered is outweighing that in this example. The concerns are weed resistance, gene flow to other like species, increased herbicide usage, and then there's also some concern around toxicity. Um, I'll touch on those a little bit here in a minute. Try not to jump on a soapbox too big or anything like that, but hope to open your eyes up. The reason I've got this clear field plus example on the right of the screen, that is would not be considered a genetically engineered crop because that was done through traditional breeding. And the technology, it was the tissue culture. That's right. It was done in tissue culture, how they were able to select for that. And it was pretty neat reading, but anyhow, it might be something for you to check out. But the framework for traditional transgenic crops does not apply to the Clearfield ALS inhibitors. And so I found that pretty interesting. Hope you do as well. So talking about the increased herbicide usage, I mean, there's really no denying the fact that if we're going to have herbicide tolerant crops, we're going to use the herbicide that the crop is tolerant to, right? So you saw some increase, and in this, it's talking about total increase. I guess where I would potentially question this, I couldn't find out if there was a substantial increase in acres, right? Because this is total herbicide volume applied. And I think that because of this technology, the acres of those crops went up substantially as well. But that's just my gut, and I can't back it with facts. This might be a little soapboxy. I apologize, but I'm trying to show you all sides of things. So the World Health Organization, this group with the group within the World Health Organization called the International Agency for Research on Cancer, they listed Roundup as a possible carcinogenic to humans, right? So we've got some ridiculous things that we know as cancer causing, like sunshine, alcoholic beverages, even something that is made to treat cancer that we know are cancer causing. And then the list that they put in with Roundup, things like working the night shift, wood smoke, processed meat, and crispy ground food were on that list. So I'm not making light of it. It's serious. It's something that we all need to consider, but I don't think that the whole picture is being painted here. And I hope I can show you that here. So another section in the WHO shows that it is not cancer causing. Australia talks about it not being cancer causing. This group in Germany found that it was not cancer causing, and the EPA also found that it's not cancer causing. And I found this most interesting. 3 of the 4 sections of that same organization found that it did not present a cancer or human health risk. So just putting it out there, trying not to be full of opinions, but just show you what's out there, and that's both sides of it, right? Now on the 2,4-D side, it's known that 2,4-D was part of Agent Orange, but the new formulations of 2,4-D that we've had for a very long time do not control, or excuse me, do not contain that dioxin that was a problem with the Agent Orange. So it's not the same. And I think a scare tactic like this is literally just that, right? It's a scare tactic because we all know how much 2,4-D gets put in yards and pastures and what have you, and used properly. These are awesome tools for the purpose that they're built. So we talked about the increase in herbicide usage, but there is a stark difference between that and the insecticide. Once the genetically engineered crops that have the insect resistance in them or insect control, this just shows the use of insecticide on corn from 76 down to 2010. And that's pretty cool, right? So that's good for the environment because you're using less pesticide. So you're protecting beneficials and whatever else, farmers, because they don't have those applications to be made, are saving production costs, which should equate, if the right year happens and you have yield and price, should equate to a better profit scenario. And then needy, because these yields are getting increased, the price of the products that are made with the crops are less. And this is kind of where I think we could really do some work as far as with other genetically engineered crops. In these other countries where we don't have the laws and restrictions and the trainings and everything that we have in the US, they're still using chemistries that have been banned from here a long time ago. So their workers are at risk. The consumer potentially is at risk if they don't follow the labels. The So that's kind of where, I was talking about the farmers, the environment, and the needy. The needy being the ones that would benefit from greater yields, as well as the farmers, and then the environment with the less chemical usage. The two pictures of eggplants, I thought that was pretty neat. These are actually grown in Pakistan, and they give the seed free to farmers, and they're allowed to save the seed from their own plants. So it's not an extra licensing burden or fee above it, trying to address, I guess, some needs in Pakistan. We don't have the genetically engineered eggplants here, but anyhow, that's the way they address their issue with those insect pests. All right, just another break in the slides. Um, Little boy Lucas there, he's got the same issue his dad has. I can't clap and keep a tune to save my life. So 1, 2, 3, jump in the air was kind of lost on him, but I think the pictures are pretty cool. So back to the insect side, you see how the lines are converging. So it's a direct correlation to the pounds of insecticide per acre going down with the acres of BT corn going up. And I think that was exactly what I said. It's kind of just showing the insecticide use being way less once these BT technologies come around. And I think I got a slide here. Yeah, so this is widely accepted, right? So by producers anyhow, you can see that the HT is the herbicide tolerant, BT is going to be the insecticide in the crop, and then same throughout the other crops. It's taken a major market share of planted acres. I mean, there's hardly any room left at the top of that soybean line, but I guess maybe it's 2 or 3% of the nation's soybeans that would be considered not genetically altered or genetically engineered. This breaks down the corn a little more, and it just kind of shows once the stacked seeds became available that that made sense, right? It was a good tool in the toolbox for most producers. So this is showing a little bit on the approved nutrition side, and that even the allergy peanuts shouldn't be considered that. But I thought it was interesting because I hadn't heard about allergy-free peanuts, but you hear more and more about people that have peanut allergies. So for something like that, where it's not changing your production model, so you're not really having any positive or negative impact on the environment. And then as well, it's not really addressing a food security issue with the needy. That, if it became real, would just be for consumers. But man, it would be a cool thing for the people that have peanut allergies to not have to be able to try peanuts. Shoot. The golden rice, that's an example from my master's class that really perturbed me because, it's all because of the consumer sentiment against this, that this country is not addressing their blindness issue. And I don't remember off the top of my head what country it was, but it was something like 500,000 folks that have this issue, and it's all from vitamin A deficiency. If they were just to switch out the rice that they were consuming, it could literally end that. Um, and these are just a few. You could address citrus greening, which is a disease down in Florida. High omega-3 soybeans and canola and flax. I think all that is on the horizon. But if we don't change the sentiment of consumers, I don't know if any of it will become real. I think the rollout of genetically engineered crops back in the day was could be blamed for all of this. I think if there was a good PR education push back then, maybe we would be farther ahead in our acceptance of these technologies. But who knows? You can't back up. That's just my guess. But on the golden rice, if it came to fruition, the consumers would benefit, the environment. I can't remember why the environment was on this one, but I think it had to do with just the quality of that crop being grown. You could probably reduce some acres. Um, and then of course the needy, the public benefit, that's an obvious one there. So these are just examples of disease resistance that are possible, and I think they're out there. They're just probably not widely used. But the top left, that's the papaya, and the convention on the left, the genetically engineered on the right, and that all that all that decrease in growth is kind of just from that virus. But and I believe the one in the middle is the grapevine, and that was Pierce's disease. So that was something that you know could potentially be used. And anyhow, and if all this came to fruition, the decrease in fungicide uses is is going to help the farmers because it's decreasing the cost. The environment would benefit because there's potentially, you can't control Mother Nature, so you never know when you make an application if it's going to be the right one or not. And then the need to increase your yield, hopefully the amount of product available goes up and price comes down potentially. So these are just more examples. Stress tolerance, I think, is our as our climate changes, because there's no denying that our climate has changed, and us figuring out ways to work amongst that and still be productive, I think, will be a large challenge coming up. The top one is just kind of your salt tolerance rice. So you can see it flourishing in, let's say, a more salt tolerant environment versus what it was. The corn over there, that's aluminum toxicity, and I think there's just all kinds of things that can be addressed through this technology if we can just find our way forward, I guess. This one was a neat example that I also wasn't aware of. The apple that doesn't brown when it's cut, and the purpose there was trying to get more consumption of apples. So just trying to help the children's diet out by having a more palatable offering, if you will, at the line. Um, Farmers, they would benefit because the shelf life on these would go up, and then consumers would benefit too from that same reason, right? You'd be able to hold stuff longer and still be able to consume it. Now this was another new to me. Like I said, I learned something, so hopefully you'll learn something if I don't ramble too much. But this is a potato that they were trying to get to offset like vaccinations. So instead of giving a kid a shot, you give them a potato, I guess. And to me, that was pretty interesting, and might be something worthwhile. But I couldn't find where that was being used at all. But it was something that the technology was there, and they were gonna, when the time is right, potentially pursue it, if you will. And I said I wouldn't go much out of the crop side, but you know, the industries that use crops for many things can have improvement as well, right? So this indigen corn, it has a enzyme in it that allows that starch to break down to sugar quicker, and basically cuts out a whole step in the processing or the industry side of that. And it's not on the slide, but every ethanol plant uses about 1 million gallons, or 1 million gallons of production equates to, like, if just cutting this step out, 450,000 of gallons of water saved, 1.3 million kilowatts of electricity, and 244 billion BTUs of natural gas. Man, it's hard to find a downside to something like that, and that's just, I think that's where we can be potentially if we continue down this road. Now, I just threw this in here just to show you what else came out in 1973, and again, I'm running a risk talking to myself here, but I just wanted to share this with y'all. So, our first mobile phones come out in 1973. Nothing to do with genetically engineering, but I thought that was interesting. OPEC's crisis, that was pretty formative on the shoot on the side of alternative fuels, right? biodiesel, ethanol, all the things that we have today was probably really spearheaded back in that day. I did not know this, but our first space station went up in 1973. It's called Skylab. And I don't know if Sherry and Linda are on here, but I thought this was pretty good for them. Hip hop really took a rise in 1973. I have included a couple YouTubes in here if you want to go deeper on the science side of this. The CRISPR technology, that is, we showed that gene gun, if you will, before, but the CRISPR technology, that's where we're at now, and that is an amazing thing. And if allowed to be, if we can continue with bioengineering or these crops, I think we can really help the nation, help the world, and then on the side of food security and climate change. But anyhow, I found those interesting, and I won't play them for you today, but they're on this presentation if you'd like it. And that's all I got, Miss Candy.
Okay, we're gonna see what kind of questions you have, Roy.
Yeah, I didn't even look in there yet.
Okay.
Can I stop
Um,
sharing?
oh,
Can I stop sharing?
yeah, you can.
All
There
right.
you go. Um, let's see. Is wheat CE or GMO? And do you believe that